The great hall of Obsidian Crown Keep had never seen so many wolves in one place. Banners of crimson and black hung from vated ceilings torchlight, casting dancing shadows across stone walls that had witnessed 1,000 years of claiming ceremonies. Tonight, the most powerful bloodlines in the realm had gathered for a single purpose: to offer their daughters to the Alpha King. Lyessa kept her head down as guards shoved her through the massive oak doors, her wrists still raw from the bindings they'd only just removed. She was not meant to be here. Not like this. 3 days ago, she had been betrothed. 3 days ago, she had believed herself loved. Move. Reject. The guard's boot connected with her lower back, sending her stumbling into the procession of elegantly dressed she-wolves who turned to stare with open disgust. Lyessa caught herself before she fell, but not before she saw her reflection in the polished marble floor, hair tangled and unwashed. Dress torn at the shoulder where Cassius had gripped her before throwing her aside. Eyes swollen from tears, she couldn't seem to stop. The other candidates wore gowns of silk and moon thread. They had been prepared for this moment their entire lives, trained in grace and seduction, in the art of pleasing an Alpha King. Lyessa had been dragged from her father's cellar, where she'd been locked after her public rejection, told she would serve one final purpose for her pack before being cast out entirely. A gift for the king, her father had sneered. Perhaps hell finds some use for you, even if no one else will. The ceremonial drums began their ancient rhythm as the candidates arranged themselves in a crescent before the empty throne. Lyessa found herself shoved to the far end, separated from the others by a deliberate gap that marked her as different, lesser, unwanted. She could feel the stares boring into her skin. Whispers slithered through the crowd like serpents. Is that the thorn would reject? I heard her own betrothed called her barren before the entire pack. Disgraceful. How dare they send such a creature to a claiming ceremony? Each word was a fresh wound, and Lyessa felt her composure cracking. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of these wolves who saw her shame as entertainment. But the tears came anyway, sliding silently down her hollow cheeks. A horn sounded deep and resonant, and the hall fell instantly silent. He entered through a door behind the throne, and Lyessa forgot how to breathe. Draven Stormbane, Alpha King of the 7 territories, moved like darkness given form. He was tall, impossibly so, with shoulders that seemed to block out the torchlight, and eyes the color of molten amber that swept across the assembled wolves with predatory assessment. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, white against sun-bronze skin, and when his gaze passed over the crescent of candidates, more than one she-wolf trembled visibly. He did not sit on his throne. Instead, he descended the steps with deliberate slowness, his black ceremonial leathers absorbing the light, a crown of twisted iron and obsidian resting against his dark hair. The claiming ceremony of the blood moon announced his advisor, an ancient wolf with silver hair and knowing eyes. Candidates will present themselves for the Alpha King's consideration. By ancient law, he may mark any he chooses. Those marked become his bound until death. The first candidate stepped forward. Selene of House Ravenmere, golden-haired and perfect, her curves displayed in a gown that left little to imagination. She performed her bow flawlessly, eyes downcast in practiced submission. The Alpha King walked past her without a word. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Selene's face flushed with humiliation as she retreated. One by one, the candidates presented themselves. Daughters of great houses, she wolves bred for this moment, each more beautiful and accomplished than the last. The Alpha King dismissed them all with nothing more than silence. Then his footsteps stopped. Lyessa became aware of polished boots at the edge of her vision. Her heart seized in her chest. No, he couldn't be looking at her. She was nothing. She was less than nothing. This one. His voice was deep and rough, carrying an accent from the old territories. Look at me. Lyessa couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The tears were still wet on her face, her shame displayed for all to see. I said, look at me. The command resonated with power that made her wolf spirit quake. Slowly trembling, Lyessa raised her head. The Alpha King's amber eyes met hers, and something in his expression shifted. The cold assessment gave way to something she couldn't name. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition, as if he was seeing something no one else could see. The entire hall had gone deathly silent. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. "Not for the crowd. Just for her. Lyessa's voice cracked. "I am no one, Your Majesty. A mistake. They shouldn't have brought me here. That is not what I asked." Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "She is Lyessa of Night Vale." Cassius emerged from the crowd, handsome and cruel, his lip curled with disdain. "My former betrothed. I rejected her 3 days ago after discovering her wolf is defective. She has never completed a proper shift. A shameful creature unworthy of any alpha, let alone a king." The crowd buzzed with fresh whispers. Lyessa wanted to disappear, to sink through the marble and vanish forever. But the Alpha King did not step away. Instead, he raised one hand and pressed his thumb to her cheek, wiping away her tears with a gentleness that seemed impossible from such a fearsome figure. His touch sent warmth spreading through her chest, igniting something deep within. "You rejected her," Draven said, his gaze never leaving Elian's face. "Because she is different." Cassius's confidence wavered. "She is broken, Your Majesty." Her wolf, the Alpha King interrupted, "is none of your concern any longer." Then before the stunned assembly, before Cassius's disbelieving eyes, before the high-born candidates who had trained their entire lives for this moment, Draven Stormbane Alpha, King of the 7 territories, lowered his head to the curve of Lyessa's throat. "No," she whispered, not in protest but in sheer disbelief. "You can't. I'm nothing. I'm mine." He growled against her skin. "You are mine." His teeth pierced her flesh. Pain and fire exploded through Lyessa's body. She cried out, her hands flying to grip his shoulders as something ancient and primal flooded her veins. The hall erupted in chaos, shouts of outrage, gasps of shock, and Sain's scream of fury, but Lyessa heard none of it. There was only the Alpha King's mouth on her throat, his hands gripping her waist, and the world reducing to ash around them. When he finally pulled back, his lips stained with her blood, those amber eyes had turned pure, molten gold. "Let any wolf who touches her know this," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "She bears my mark. She is under my protection, and she is my first and only choice." Lyessa swayed on her feet, her hand pressed to the bite that throbbed like a second heartbeat. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Cassius's face twisted with a hatred that promised this was far from over. Lyessa woke to silk sheets and the scent of pine and woods. For one blissful moment, she forgot where she was. She stretched against the impossibly soft bedding, thinking she must be dreaming, until her fingers brushed against the wound on her neck, the mark. Lyessa sat up with a gasp, her hand flying to her throat. The bite was tender, but not painful, and when her fingers traced its edges, she felt something pulse beneath the skin, something warm and alive that hadn't been there before. "You shouldn't touch it so much." A woman's voice made her jump. Not until it's fully sealed. An elderly wolf sat in a chair by the window, her silver hair braided with beads of bone and amber. Despite her aged appearance, her eyes were sharp and knowing, watching Lyessa with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Where am I?" Lyessa managed her voice. "The King's Tower." The woman rose and moved to a table laden with herbs and steaming pots. "I am Aurelia, the royal healer. You've been unconscious for 2 days." 2 days? Lyessa's mind reeled. The last thing she remembered was the claiming ceremony, the Alpha King's teeth in her throat, the world dissolving into fire and darkness. "The mark," she whispered. Why would he choose me? I'm nobody. I'm defective." Aurelia paused her work, turning to study Lyessa with an unreadable expression. "Is that what they told you? That you're defective? My wolf won't emerge properly. When I try to shift, it's—" Lyessa shook her head, old shame rising in her chest. "It's wrong. Incomplete. That's why Cassius rejected me. That's why my father was going to cast me out." "Interesting." Aurelia brought a cup of something warm and bitter smelling to the bedside. "Drink this. It will help with the transition." "What transition?" The healer's lips curved in what might have been a smile. "You've been marked by an Alpha King. Child, one of the most powerful wolves in 1,000 years. Did you think it would leave you unchanged?" Before Lyessa could respond, a commotion erupted beyond the chamber door. Raised voices, the clatter of armored boots, and then a sound that made her blood freeze a wolf's snarl, deep and territorial and utterly inhuman. The door burst open. Draven stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with that same molten gold she'd seen in the ceremony hall. Behind him, 2 guards lay sprawled on the floor, clearly thrown aside. "She's awake." It wasn't a question. His gaze fixed on Lyessa with an intensity that made her want to simultaneously flee and draw closer. "Everyone out." Aurelia bowed her head. "Your Majesty, she needs rest. The mark is still out." The healer departed without another word, closing the door behind her. Lyessa found herself alone with the Alpha King. He approached the bed slowly, as if she were a wounded animal he didn't want to startle. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "You've been screaming in your sleep," he said quietly. "For 2 days. I could feel your nightmares through our connection." Lyessa stared at him. "Connection? The mark creates a link between us." He stopped at the edge of the bed, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "I can sense your emotions, your fear, your pain." His jaw tightened. "I felt everything they did to you, everything that Mael said before he rejected you." Heat flooded Lyessa's cheeks. "You can feel my memory's fragments enough to know that everyone who should have protected you failed." His voice dropped to a growl. "Enough to know that I will never let anyone hurt you again." Something in Lyessa's chest cracked at his words, at the fierce sincerity in them. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her as if she mattered. "Why me?" she whispered. "There were so many others, beautiful wolves from powerful houses. Why would you choose?" She didn't finish the sentence. The Alpha King's hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face toward the window where moonlight spilled across the floor. "Do you truly not know?" he asked softly. Lyessa shook her head, lost in eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. Before he could answer, a sharp knock interrupted them. A messenger's voice, urgent and breathless. "Your Majesty." The Night Vale delegation demands an audience. They claimed the marking was performed under false pretenses. They're calling for annulment. Draven's expression hardened to stone. "They want you returned to them," he said quietly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Your father, your former betrothed. They say you belong to them." Fear iced through Lyessa's veins. "No, please. I can't go back there. You're not going anywhere." The growl in his voice was pure alpha command. "But this is far from over, little wolf. They will fight for you, and before this ends, you'll have to decide if you're willing to fight for yourself." He released her face and strode toward the door, every line of his body radiating controlled fury. "Rest," he commanded without looking back. "You'll need your strength for what's coming." The door closed behind him, and Lyessa was left alone with a mark that pulsed against her throat like a warning. The dream started that very night. Lyessa found herself in a forest she didn't recognize, silver mist curling between ancient trees whose branches clawed at a blood-red moon. She was running, but not in fear, in exhilaration, her bare feet silent against the frost-covered ground, her senses sharper than they had ever been. And she was not alone. A massive wolf ran beside her, its fur black as midnight, its eyes glowing amber gold. The creature moved with terrifying grace, easily matching her pace, and when it looked at her, she felt a recognition that went beyond logic. "Mate," something whispered in her mind. "Mine?" Lyessa woke with a gasp, her body drenched in sweat, the mark on her throat searing like a brand. She pressed her palm against it and felt something stir beneath the skin, something that wanted out. Her wolf for the first time in her life. She could feel it clearly. Not the weak, flickering presence that had always embarrassed her, but something powerful and primal that clawed at the edges of her consciousness. "What's happening to me?" She breathed into the darkness. A shadow moved near the window. Lyessa's scream caught in her throat as Draven materialized from the darkness, his expression tight with concern. "You called for me," he said through our link. "I could feel your distress." "I didn't." Lyessa pulled the sheets higher, suddenly aware of how thin her sleeping gown was. "I don't know how to control it. Any of this." He moved closer, and moonlight caught his features, illuminating the tension in his jaw. "The mark amplifies what already exists. Your wolf is waking up Lyessa. Whatever was blocking it before the bond is burning through those walls. Blocking it." Confusion mixed with the lingering heat of her dream. Nothing was blocking it. I was born this way. Defective. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Who told you that, everyone?" "My father. The pack healers. Cassius always said Cassius." Draven spoke the name like a curse. "That male will answer for many things before this is over." He sat on the edge of her bed, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. The mark throbbed in response, sending waves of warmth cascading down her spine. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "About why I chose you." Lyessa's breath caught. "Please, when I looked at you in that hall, I didn't see a broken wolf," his voice roughened. "I saw a woman who had survived things that would have destroyed others. I saw strength buried beneath years of being told she was worthless. And I saw," he stopped, his hands fisting against his thighs. "What?" Lyessa whispered. "My mate." The words fell like stones into still water. "The wolf I've been searching for my entire life. The one the moon goddess promised me in dreams since I was a boy." Lyessa's world tilted. "That's impossible. I'm nobody. You are everything." He turned to face her fully, and his eyes were glowing gold again. "Don't you feel it? The pull between us. The way the mark sings when we're close." She did feel it. Gods help her. She felt it like fire in her blood. "There are those who will try to separate us," Draven continued. "Your former pack is already spreading lies. Celine's family has demanded I take her as a second mate to appease them. And there are older powers, darker forces, who will not want this bond to complete." Complete. Lyessa's voice trembled. "What do you mean, complete?" Before he could answer, the door crashed open. Thessaly stood in the doorway, her face pale with urgency. "Your Majesty, they've come. The Nightvale delegation. They've brought evidence." Draven rose, his body shielding Lyessa instinctively. "What evidence?" "Documentation. Signed and sealed by their pack healer." The Sul's eyes flickered to Lyessa with something like pity. "They claim she's not just defective. They claim her wolf was magically bound at birth. Deliberately suppressed." "Why would anyone do that?" Lyessa asked. The Sul's answer turned her blood to ice. "Because of what you truly are, child. Because your mother wasn't just any wolf." The healer's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "She was a white wolf, a direct descendant of the first pack, and if that power awakens in you, there are those who would burn the world to control it or destroy you before you can claim it." Lyessa looked to Draven, searching for reassurance, but his expression had gone deadly cold. "Get her dressed," he commanded Aurelia. "Arm the guards. No one enters this tower without my permission." He turned to Lyessa, and for just a moment his hand cradled her cheek with impossible tenderness. "I will protect you no matter what it costs." Then he was gone, leaving Lyessa with a mark that pulsed a secret she never knew she carried, and the growing certainty that her life would never be the same. The confrontation took place in the great hall where Lyessa had been marked 3 days before. She stood beside Draven's throne, dressed in borrowed finery that felt like armor, the Alpha King's hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The warmth of his touch steadied her, even as the hostile faces of the Nightvale delegation made her stomach churn. Her father stood at the front of the group, his expression one of calculated grief that Lyessa knew was entirely false. Beside him, Cassius wore a smug smile that made her skin crawl. "We come seeking justice," her father declared, his voice carrying across the hall. "My daughter was taken under false pretenses. She was promised to Cassius of our pack, bound by contract since childhood. The Alpha King's mark was made without proper consent. Consent." Draven's voice was dangerously soft. Your daughter was brought to my ceremony in chains thrown at my feet like garbage. You dare speak to me of consent. She is defective." Cassius interrupted, stepping forward. "Surely the great Alpha King deserves better than a wolf who cannot shift." "This was clearly a misunderstanding. Allow us to take her home and we'll send a proper candidate. You will address me with respect." Draven cut in. "Or you will not address me at all." Cassius's face flushed with suppressed anger, but he stepped back. Lyessa's father tried again, his tone shifting to false sympathy. "We only want what's best for our daughter. She's fragile, confused. She doesn't understand what she's agreed to. She agreed to nothing." Draven rose from his throne and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "I chose her. I marked her. She is mine by ancient law, and no contract made before her birth supersedes my claim. Then let her speak for herself." Cassius's voice rang out, challenge clear in every syllable. "Let Lyessa tell this court whether she wishes to stay with a stranger who marked her without permission or return to the pack that raised her." Every eye in the hall turned to Lyessa. She felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Her father's gaze held a warning. She knew all too well the threat of what would happen if she defied him. Cassius's smile promised humiliation and worse. But beside her, Draven's hand pressed gently against her spine. Not demanding, not commanding, simply present. Through their connection, she felt something unexpected, his fear. The Alpha King, who had faced armies and brought kingdoms to heel, was afraid she would choose to leave. The realization cracked something open in her chest. "I speak for myself," Lyessa said, her voice steadier than she expected. "And I say that I was never given a choice before. Not when I was betrothed as a child. Not when I was called defective. Not when I was locked in a cellar and dragged to this ceremony in disgrace." Her father's expression flickered with warning. She continued anyway. "The first person who ever asked what I wanted, who ever looked at me like I was worth something, was the Alpha King." Lyessa stepped forward, drawing strength from the mark that pulsed warm against her throat. "I choose to stay." Silence crashed through the hall. Then Cassius laughed. An ugly sound. "Pretty words from a broken wolf, but you forget, Lyessa. I know what you really are, or rather, what you're not." He turned to address the crowd. "This woman cannot shift. She has no wolf. Whatever the king thinks he marked. It wasn't a true mate. It was a mistake." "Then let us test that claim," Draven said quietly. Lyessa's blood ran cold. "What the bonding verification ritual?" An elderly advisor stepped forward. "Ancient law permits it when a claiming is contested. If the mark is true, both wolves will be able to complete a synchronized shift. If not, Cassius finished triumphantly. The mark is void, and Lyessa returns to Nightvale where she belongs." Lyessa's heart hammered against her ribs. A synchronized shift. She had never fully shifted in her life. The few times she'd tried, her wolf had emerged wrong-twisted, incomplete, causing her nothing but pain and shame. She looked at Draven, expecting to see doubt. Instead, she found absolute certainty. "Tomorrow at moonrise," he announced, "we perform the ritual." The court erupted in murmurs, but Lyessa barely heard them. Draven's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "Trust me." He breathed too low for others to hear. "Trust what's between us." But as the Nightvale delegation departed with victory gleaming in their eyes, Lyessa caught a different exchange. Cassius pausing beside her father, words passing between them that made both wolves smile. And in that moment she understood with terrible clarity. They weren't worried about the ritual. They knew something she didn't. Whatever had been done to suppress her wolf, whatever magic had bound her since birth, they had planned for this. They had always planned for this. Tomorrow she wouldn't just fail the ritual. Tomorrow she would lose everything. The ritual grounds lay beyond the castle walls, a circular clearing, surrounded by standing stones older than memory itself. Moonlight poured down like liquid silver as Lyessa walked between the ancient pillars, Draven at her side, the entire court watching from the shadows beyond. Every step felt heavier than the last. "Breathe," Draven murmured, his hand finding hers. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." Lyessa tried to draw comfort from his words, but the mark on her throat had been pulsing since sunset, not with warmth, but with something that felt like warning through the invisible thread between them. She could sense Draven's emotions, fierce protectiveness, simmering rage at those who had hurt her, and beneath it all a tenderness that made her chest ache. But she could also sense something else. Doubt. Not in her, never in her, but in what was about to happen. The elderly advisor who had proposed the ritual stood at the center of the stone circle, his ceremonial robes gleaming white in the moonlight. "The verification shall proceed as follows," he announced. "The marked pair will stand at the heart of the circle. They will call their wolves simultaneously. If the bond is true, their beasts will emerge as one, synchronized in form and spirit. And if not," Cassius called from the crowd, false concern dripping from his voice, "then the mark is declared void, and the female returns to her original pack." Lyessa's fingers tightened around Draven's. She could feel her wolf stirring restlessly beneath her skin, stronger than it had ever been since the marking, but still trapped behind whatever barrier had imprisoned it her entire life. "I can't do this," she thought desperately. "I've never been able to shift. Not fully, not once." As if hearing her thoughts, Draven pulled her close, his lips brushing her ear. "Your wolf is there, Lyessa. I can feel her through our link. She's been waiting for you to set her free. What if I can't? Then we face what comes together." His golden eyes held hers. "I will never let them take you. Do you understand? Never." The advisor gestured them to the center of the circle. As Lyessa took her position across from Draven, she caught sight of her father and Cassius at the edge of the clearing. They weren't watching with anxiety. They were watching with anticipation. "Begin," the advisor commanded. Draven's shift started immediately, bones cracking and reforming muscles rippling beneath his skin as his body surrendered to the beast within. Within moments, a massive black wolf stood before her, its eyes glowing amber gold, its presence so overwhelming that several onlookers stumbled backward. Now it was her turn. Lyessa closed her eyes and reached inward, searching for her wolf the way she had 1,000 times before. She could feel it there, closer than ever, straining against invisible chains. "Please," she begged silently, "please come out for him, for us." Something stirred. Her bones began to ache, her skin prickling with the first signs of transformation. Hope surged through her chest. It was working. For the first time in her life, it was actually working. Then the pain hit. Not the natural pain of shifting, but something sharp and invasive magic that tasted of blood and betrayal activating deep within her core. Lyessa screamed as her partial transformation reversed violently, her wolf being shoved back behind the barrier with brutal force. Through vision blurring with agony, she saw Cassius step forward. His hand raised his lips, moving in an incantation she couldn't hear. "He's doing this. He's controlling the suppression." "The bond fails," someone shouted. "Her wolf won't emerge." "No!" Lyessa gasped, struggling to stay upright. "It's not, there's magic, he's—" But her voice was lost in the chaos erupting around them. The black wolf that was Draven snarled and lunged toward Cassius, but guards surged forward to intercept him. "The law is clear," Cassius's voice rang out triumphantly. "She cannot shift. The mark is void." Lyessa fell to her knees, the suppression magic tearing through her like poison. She could feel her wolf howling in trapped fury, could feel the connection with Draven straining as dark power worked to sever it. Then her father was there, gripping her arm with bruising force. "Time to come home, daughter," he hissed. "Did you really think you could escape what you are?" Lyessa looked desperately for Draven, but he was surrounded now, not just by guards, but by wolves from rival packs who had been waiting for this moment. This had been planned, all of it. "Draven," she screamed. His howl tore through the night, filled with rage and anguish, but he couldn't reach her. Silver-tipped spears held him at bay, the searing metal keeping him back as more wolves closed in. Her father's hand closed over her mouth as something sharp pierced her neck. Not teeth, but a needle injecting liquid fire into her veins. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Draven's wolf being driven back by those gleaming spear points, and Cassius's smile as he watched her fall. Lyessa woke in chains, not metaphorical ones, actual iron shackles that bound her wrists to a stone wall, their cold weight a physical reminder of her captivity. The room around her was unfamiliar, rough-hewn stone, no windows, torchlight flickering from sconces that cast dancing shadows. She was underground. She could feel it in the weight of the air, the absence of the moon's pull. Draven, she reached for him instinctively, desperate to feel his presence, and gasped at what she found. He was there, but distant, muffled like hearing someone scream through water, and the emotions bleeding through that weakened connection made her blood run cold. Rage, grief, and beneath it all, a terrible resolve that felt like goodbye. Awake at last, Lyessa's head snapped toward the voice. Cassius emerged from the shadows, his handsome face twisted with satisfaction. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice. "What have you done? You're exactly where you belong." He crouched before her close enough that she could smell the corruption beneath his pleasant exterior. "In the place where your mother died." The words hit her like a physical blow. "My mother? Oh, they never told you." Cassius's smile widened. "Your mother was the last white wolf, the most powerful shifter, born in 500 years. And when she refused to mate with my father, when she chose your pathetic sire instead, we made sure she paid for that insult." Horror crept through Lyessa's veins. "You killed her. We bound her wolf. First suppressed her power until it consumed her from the inside." Cassius's eyes glittered with cruel pleasure. "The same magic we used on you the day you were born. Your father agreed to it willingly. He was terrified of what you might become, what you still might become." "If the bond with Draven isn't severed completely, why?" Lyessa's voice broke. "Why do any of this?" Cassius rose, pacing before her like a predator savoring its prey. "Because a white wolf bonded to an Alpha King would be unstoppable. The two of you together could unite all 7 territories, could end the power games that have kept wolves like my family in control for generations." He turned to face her. "We couldn't let that happen, so we ensured you would never awaken. And when you were marked anyway, we enacted our contingency." "The ritual," Lyessa whispered. "You sabotaged it. I activated the binding that's been inside you since birth." Cassius's smile turned vicious. "But here's the part you'll truly appreciate. The suppression magic isn't just blocking your wolf anymore. It's killing you. Without the bond to sustain you, without your wolf to fight back, you'll be dead within 3 days." Fear and defiance warred in Lyessa's chest. "Draven will come for me." "Oh, I'm counting on it." Cassius leaned close, his breath hot against her face. "You see? I've sent word to your precious Alpha King, told him exactly where you are and exactly what's happening to you, told him that the only way to save you is to come alone and surrender himself. He won't. He already has." Lyessa's heart stopped. "The bond works both ways, little wolf." Cassius's voice dropped to a poisonous whisper. "He can feel you dying. Every moment of agony, every weakening heartbeat, and your noble king has decided that his life is a fair trade for yours." "No." The word tore from Lyessa's throat. "No, he can't. He's already on his way alone, unarmed, walking straight into the trap we've laid." Cassius straightened, adjusting his sleeves casually. "By tomorrow's sunset, the Alpha King will be dead. The bond will be broken. And you," he met her eyes with cold finality, "you'll follow him shortly after. The last white wolf extinguished forever." He left her, then his footsteps echoing up a stairwell she couldn't see. Lyessa slumped against her chains, despair threatening to swallow her whole. Through the fading connection, she could feel Draven moving closer, feel his grim determination, his willingness to sacrifice everything for her. "Don't," she screamed across the link that bound their souls. "Please don't do this." But if he heard her, he gave no sign. The torch on the wall flickered, and Lyessa became aware of something else in the darkness, a presence she hadn't noticed before, ancient, watchful, and somehow familiar. Child of the white wolf, the voice was neither male nor female, seeming to come from the stones themselves. "You carry your mother's legacy. Her power sleeps within you still." Lyessa's breath caught. Who's there? We are what remains of those who came before. The spirits of the first pack bound to this sacred ground. The present seemed to pulse with each word. We have waited long for one like you to awaken. I can't awaken anything, Lyessa said bitterly. The magic suppresses your wolf. Yes, but you are more than wolf alone. The ancient voice grew stronger. Your mother's line carries the blood of the moon goddess herself. That power cannot be bound by mortal spells, only hidden, forgotten. A spark of hope flickered in Lyessa's chest. Something that wasn't her wolf, but felt equally primal. How do I access it? You must stop fighting what you are. Stop believing the lies they told you. The presence pressed closer, and suddenly Lyessa could see them ghostly wolves, silver and white, surrounding her in the darkness. You are not broken. You were never broken. You were so powerful they had to cage you at birth. Tears carved hot trails down her cheeks. He's going to die. Draven is going to die because of me. Then stop him. The spirit spoke as one now. Break your chains, claim your birthright, and run. Lyessa closed her eyes, reaching not for her wolf this time, but for something deeper, something that had been waiting in her blood since the day she was born. Please. She begged whatever gods might listen. Give me the strength to save him. The first chain shattered. Power flooded through Lyessa like nothing she had ever experienced. Not the familiar warmth of her struggling wolf, but something older, purer moonlight made manifest, carousing through her veins and incinerating the suppression magic like fire through cobwebs. She could feel the binding spells that had caged her since birth, dissolving one by one, each broken chain releasing another fragment of her true self. The iron shackles exploded from her wrists. Lyessa rose on trembling legs, her body illuminated by silver light that seemed to emanate from her very skin. Around her, the spirits of the first pack howled their approval. Go, they urged. Find your mate. Complete what was begun. She ran. The underground chamber gave way to tunnels that twisted and climbed through the earth. Lyessa didn't know where she was going, but the bond pulled her forward like a compass needle seeking north. Through it, she could feel Draven closer now, but weakening. They're hurting him. The thought gave her speed she shouldn't have possessed. She burst from the tunnel into open air, gasping at the sight of a ruined fortress, silhouetted against the rising moon. Guards patrolled the walls, but Lyessa barely saw them. All she saw was the courtyard below, where Draven knelt in chains. He was surrounded by wolves from the Night Vale pack, his body bearing fresh wounds that gleamed dark in the moonlight. Cassius stood before him, holding a blade that glowed with sickly green light silver. Lyessa realized a silver blade designed to kill wolves. Any last words Alpha King Cassius's voice carried on the wind? Any messages for your dead mate? She's not dead. Draven's voice was ravaged but defiant. I can still feel her, a dying echo. Nothing more. Cassius raised the blade. Your bond ends here. No. Lyessa didn't remember leaping from the tunnel entrance. Didn't remember crossing the distance between them. One moment she was watching in horror. The next she was there, her body colliding with Cassius and sending them both sprawling across the cobblestones. The silver blade skittered away into the darkness. Lyessa. Draven's voice cracked on her name. How later? She scrambled to her feet, placing herself between him and the wolves now closing in. The power still surged through her, but she could feel it flickering unstable. Whatever she had unleashed, she didn't know how to control it, and her body was paying the price. Pain lanced through her chest, not from an external wound, but from something internal. The suppression magic might be broken, but it had left damage behind. Her heart stuttered, her vision blurred, and she felt something warm trickle from her nose. Blood. You should be dead. Cassius snarled, rising to his feet. The binding was never meant to hold her. Aurelia's voice rang across the courtyard, and Lyessa turned to see the elderly healer striding through a gap in the fortress wall, followed by wolves. She didn't recognize wolves bearing the Stormcrest banner. Your family's magic was designed for ordinary shifters, not for the daughter of a white wolf. Reinforcements. Cassius laughed, though fear had crept into his eyes. "You think a handful of loyal dogs can, not a handful—" Aurelia smiled grimly. "All of them." Wolves poured into the courtyard from every direction. Hundreds of them, their eyes gleaming in the moonlight, their snarls filling the air. The Night Vale wolves, seeing themselves hopelessly outnumbered, began to back away. "It's over, Cassius." Draven had risen to his feet, his chains shattered by one of the arriving wolves. Despite his wounds, he radiated lethal authority. "Surrender and I might let you live long enough to stand trial." For a moment, Lyessa thought it was truly finished. Then Cassius's hand closed around something at his belt. A small vial filled with black liquid, and his expression twisted into something like triumph. "You think I didn't plan for this?" He uncorked the vial with his teeth. "If I can't have victory, I'll have vengeance." He threw the contents at Lyessa. Draven moved faster than thought, shoving her aside and taking the liquid full across his chest where it touched his skin. The flesh immediately began to blacken, silver dark veins spreading outward like poison, the same corruption that had killed her mother, the same poison that had claimed countless wolves before. Draven collapsed. "No." Lyessa caught him before he hit the ground, her hands pressing against his chest as if she could hold the poison at bay. "No, no, no. Wolfsbane, concentrate." Cassius laughed even as guards seized him. "The same formula that killed your mother. Even the great Alpha King can't survive that." Lyessa looked down at Draven's face, watched the color draining from his skin, felt the bond between them guttering like a candle in the wind. He was dying, and she had no idea how to save him. "There has to be something." Lyessa's voice shattered on the words. "This is, please." The healer knelt beside them, her weathered face grim as she examined the spreading corruption. "The wolf's pain is already in his blood. Even if I had the antidote, it would be too late, too. Then what? I just watch him die." Lyessa clutched Draven's hand, feeling the bond between them dimming with each passing heartbeat. "I won't accept that. I can't." Through their fading connection, she felt Draven's consciousness stir. His eyes fluttered open, finding hers with effort. "Lyessa." Her name was barely a whisper. "You're alive because of you." Her vision blurred with unshed tears. "You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have traded yourself for me. Would do it again." A ghost of a smile crossed his ashen lips. 1,000 times. "Don't." She pressed her forehead to his, feeling the unnatural heat of the poison consuming him. "Don't say goodbye. I didn't break my chains just to lose you. The bond," he rasped, "isn't complete. If I die now, you might survive. The mark might fade instead of, I don't want to survive without you." The words tore from somewhere primal, somewhere she hadn't known existed before him. "I spent my whole life being told I was nothing, being treated like something broken and worthless. And then you looked at me like I was everything." His hand trembled as it rose to cup her cheek. "You are everything." Around them, the Stormcrest wolves had formed a protective circle, holding back both enemies and allies. Even Cassius, now in chains, had gone silent, watching the scene with dawning uncertainty. The Saal placed a gentle hand on Lyessa's shoulder. "Child, the only power that could purge Wolf's bane, this advanced would require the blood of the first pack." The ancient spirit spoke through Lyessa's lips, their voices harmonizing with hers. The light of the moon goddess herself. Thessaly drew back sharply. "Impossible. That magic hasn't existed since my mother." Lyessa felt the power stirring again, rising from the depths where it had been caged for 23 years. This time she didn't fight it. "You said the suppression was broken. You said I carry her legacy. Lyessa, you don't know how to control that power. If you try to channel it without training, then I'll learn." She looked down at Draven, watching the silver-black veins creeping toward his heart. "Or I'll die trying. But I will not kneel here and watch the only person who ever loved me fade away." She closed her eyes and reached inward. Not for her wolf this time, not only for her wolf. She reached for everything. The beast that had been caged since birth, the divine blood that ran in her veins, and the bond that tied her soul to the man dying in her arms. She gathered it all together and pulled. The pain was immediate and absolute. Every cell in her body seemed to catch fire simultaneously. She heard screaming her own voice, raw and desperate, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The power was awake now, truly awake, and it demanded release. Let go, the spirits urged. Trust what you are. Lycan let go. Light erupted from her skin, not the soft silver glow from before, but blazing white radiance that turned the courtyard bright as midday. She felt her bones begin to shift, her muscles tear and reform, but this time there was no resistance. Her wolf surged forward with a howl of pure joy. Finally free. When the transformation completed, she stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. Her fur was pure white, luminous in the moonlight, and her eyes, she could see a reflection in the polished armor of a nearby guard, burned with the pale fire of the moon itself. She was smaller than Draven's wolf form, but the power radiating from her made the wolves around her drop to their knees instinctively. White Wolf rippled through the crowd. The White Wolf has returned. But Lycan had no time for their awe. She turned to Draven's motionless form and pressed her muzzle to his chest right where the poison had struck. "Heal," she commanded, pouring everything she had into the word. "Live. Stay with me." The light that flowed from her into him was visible, a river of moonfire that drove back the corruption centimeter by centimeter. She could feel it draining her, feel her life force ebbing with each moment. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. The silver-black veins retreated from his heart. The color began returning to his skin. And then, with a gasp that seemed to shake the very stones beneath them, Draven's eyes flew open, clear and golden and alive with restored life. Lycan. He sat up sharply, his gaze finding her wolf form with wonder. You're Wolf." She shifted back without conscious thought, the transformation feeling as natural as breathing, and collapsed against his chest. The exhaustion was crushing. Her body pushed far beyond its limits, but she was laughing, actually laughing, with tears spilling down her face. "You're alive," she sobbed. "You're alive! You're alive! You're—" He silenced her with a kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce, and tasted of blood and tears and the sharp edge of almost losing his hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. And through the bond, strong now, stronger than ever, she felt his emotions crash into her like waves. Relief, joy, love, so overwhelming it stole her breath. And beneath it all, a fierce, possessive need that matched her own. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Draven's forehead pressed against hers. "The bond," he breathed. "It's still incomplete. You've given everything to save me, but I've given nothing in return." Lycan understood. The mark on her throat, now glowing faintly with renewed power, was only half of what bound them. She had accepted his claim, but he had never accepted hers. "Then let me finish it." She could barely stay upright, her body screaming for rest, but this was more important than exhaustion. "Let me claim you back." Draven's answer was to tilt his head, baring his throat in a gesture of complete surrender. The most powerful wolf in the realm offering himself entirely to her, Lycan didn't hesitate. She pressed her lips to the curve of his neck, feeling his pulse hammer beneath her mouth, and let her teeth find the spot where his wolf's spirit dwelled closest to the surface. When she bit down, his blood was fire and lightning on her tongue. Draven's groan shook through both of them as their bond completed. It was like 2 rivers joining 2 flames, becoming one. Suddenly she could feel everything he felt, see fragments of his memories, understand him in ways that transcended words. She saw his lonely childhood, his burden of kingship, his desperate hope when he first saw her crying in that ceremony hall. And she felt the moment he knew, truly knew that she was his mate, his destiny, his home, mine. He growled against her hair, echoing the words from the night he first marked her. "Yours," she whispered back, "and you are mine." Around them, the Ravencrest wolves erupted in howls of celebration. Even Aurelia was weeping, her ancient face transformed by wonder. "The bond is complete," the healer announced, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "The White Wolf has claimed her king. Let all who witness know Lyessa of the White Wolf bloodline is Alpha Queen of the 7 territories." The title settled over Lyessa like a mantle, heavy but right. She looked up at Draven, this fierce warrior king who had chosen her when no one else would, who had been willing to die rather than let her suffer. His face was still pale from the poisons near victory, but his eyes blazed with triumph. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now." He pulled her closer, tucking her against his chest where she could hear his heart, their heart beating in perfect synchronization. "Now we go home. We rebuild. We make sure no wolf is ever treated the way you were treated. And Cassius, my father." Draven's expression hardened briefly. "They'll face justice for what they've done. Your mother's death, you're binding all of it." His gaze softened as it returned to her face. "But that's for tomorrow. Tonight I want nothing but you." Lyessa thought of the frightened, broken girl who had arrived at the ceremony in chains just days ago. That girl seemed like a stranger now. In her place stood someone new, someone powerful and loved, and finally, whole. "Take me home," she said. And as Draven lifted her into his arms, carrying her through the parting crowd of wolves who bowed their heads in reverence, Lyessa understood at last what she had been searching for her entire life. Not acceptance, not belonging, but this. A love fierce enough to burn away every lie she had ever been told about herself. A mate who saw her truth when she couldn't see it herself, a pack that would become her family. She pressed her face into Draven's neck, breathing in his scent of pine and wood smoke and home. The White Wolf had finally awakened, and she was never going back to